I think morality points to the existence of God and gives some clues as to what God might be like. Hi, I'm Marcus and I've written a short chapter about morality in my book The God Puzzle. I've also made it into an animated video, but here I want to explore a few more thoughts. For centuries, in certain parts of India, Hindu widows were expected to climb on top of their dead husband's body to be cremated with him. There were some strong social and religious incentives to do this, so many saw no other option than to burn to death in excruciating agony while the rest of the community looked on approvingly. Most of us have deep convictions about what is right and wrong, an innate sense that some things, like widow burning, are just plain wrong. But can an action be objectively good or bad? Or was DJ right in The Last Jedi when he said, "Good guys, bad guys, made up words. It's all machine, partner, live free"? By objective morality, I mean that good and evil are not just made up words. I mean that some things are wrong independent of human opinion, preference, conviction, or belief. My deep intuition in the objectivity of morality causes me, therefore, to look for its firmest foundation outside of ourselves. That is something that would make morality maximally objective. Something that would give it a degree of objectivity that matches the depth of grounding I know these things to have. Before I put forward what I think gives a maximal grounding for morality, I want to look at three popular alternatives and indicate why, for me at least, each one is a little too shaky and shallow. First, humanism, which grounds morality in increasing some measure of global happiness. Second, rationalism, which grounds morality in what rational creatures might agree upon as universally binding to all. And third, evolutionism, which grounds morality in the successful propagation of DNA. They're all related, but I'm going to consider each in turn. So first, some have sought to ground morality in something objective about humanity's desires. They argue that everyone's ultimate, deepest, base desire is to be happy, and so this universal, foundational desire forms a firm basis for a quasi-objective morality, which is thought to be the only sort of objective morality that exists. It's not completely objective in the sense that objective moral values and duties exist independent of our desires and preferences. Rather, it is grounded in a supposed objective fact about our desires and preferences, namely that everyone desires and prefers their own happiness more than anything else. It is considered objectively true that all humans desire their own happiness as their deepest and greatest good, and so a morality based on maximising happiness is considered to be as objective as it gets. Now, I have some sympathy with this theory. It's not grounded in human opinion, but in a proposed objective fact about human opinion. But that said, I'll list a few questions or concerns I have with maximising happiness as the basis for objective morality. 1. Happiness has so far not been defined precisely enough for me to know what is actually being proposed here. Is it just a feeling, and if so, what actually produces it? 2. I'm not convinced happiness is everyone's deepest desire, and I think we should take people seriously when they say that it's not theirs. 3. How do we make the leap from wanting to maximise our own personal happiness to desiring that everyone's happiness must be maximised? And 4. Just because something makes us happy or other people happy doesn't always seem to make it right, at least not in the medium term. So 5. What timescales are we talking about? Minutes or millenniums? Perhaps this and other issues are linked to the wider problem of computation, how to calculate, let alone predict, total happiness. For example, 6, what about animal happiness? How do we measure that and factor it in? 7, where is the strong sense of obligation or ought that I think morality requires? 8, ultimate personal justice seems lacking. People can get away with doing terrible evil or even benefit from it. 9, who gets to tell us what makes us most happy, and how are they going to enforce it? As the psychiatrist and writer Ian McGilchrist notes, the worst atrocities in the history of mankind have been committed by people with a theory about how to make life better and how to make the world a better place. And finally, 10, frankly, the whole thing seems to be steeped in a Western self-centered belief in personal happiness above all else. So that's some thoughts on the humanistic happiness hypothesis. What then about a more abstract, rational, philosophical basis for objective morality? Well, some have defined morality as the set of rules which perfectly rational beings would come up with to govern their society, before they knew what their social status or role would be in that society. It is argued that in this cleverly conceived thought experiment, we would expect the participants to come up with the rules that are best for everyone, presumably just in case they ended up being one of the less fortunate. Now, apart from sharing some of the problems I've already mentioned, I can think of a couple more. First, what exactly is meant by a being? Could one of the rational participants end up being a lion, or a slug, or an unborn baby? Second, what does perfectly rational mean? At worst, it could mean people who think like me and agree with me, but at best it might mean using the correct laws of logic by which a valid argument is advanced. But in that case, what are the starting premises? An argument needs to be not just valid but sound, so exactly what premises are these rational beings reasoning from? Do they think God exists and his revelation needs to be factored in as part of reality? Or perhaps those proposing this thought experiment assume it's not rational to believe in God and that everyone taking part is a self-interested atheist. What is a rational level of risk to reward? That is, would a rational person take the chance of increasing the happiness of 99% of the population by reducing the happiness of 1%? And what exactly do these rational beings value? Is it happiness? Or productivity? Or colonialization of the universe, or the glory of God? Basically, I think we need to be watchful in case the term perfectly rational becomes a Trojan horse used to smuggle in a host of hidden assumptions. In any case, thirdly, even if this thought experiment did approximate some people's intuitive sense of what would be the moral thing to do, it's still just an abstract description with no causal power in the real world. Again, it has no ought to it. You may be describing an effect or outcome of something with causal power, but a thought experiment is not a real thing. Since we know our situation in life, it's all too easy to decouple ourselves from this abstract morality and act in our own self-interest. Atoms can't ignore physical laws in the way that we can ignore this type of moral law. How troubled do you think an evil dictator would be about this thought experiment? So, while I quite like this thought experiment, the reality is we do know our situation in life. We don't really know who should get to take part. We come preloaded with all sorts of core beliefs, values and goals, and as I say, there is no sense of ought here. At best, it's an approximate description of some people's intuitive sense of morality, or what might suit some beings best. Now that might prove a sufficient grounding for your experience of morality, but it's just not enough for me. So perhaps we could ground morality not in feelings of happiness or a hypothetical thought experiment, but in biological evolution. Morality would then be the class of behaviours most likely to succeed in passing on a population's DNA. The philosopher of science Michael Ruse describes this view when he says, "The position of the modern evolutionist is that humans have an awareness of morality because such an awareness is of biological worth. Morality is a biological adaptation no less than our hands and feet and teeth. Considered as a rationally justifiable set of claims about an objective something, ethics is illusory. I appreciate that when somebody says, 'Love thy neighbour as thyself,' they think they are referring above and beyond themselves. Nevertheless, such reference is truly without foundation. Morality is just an aid to survival and reproduction, and any deeper meaning is illusory." When considering the view that evolution is the foundation of morality, at least 5 things come to mind, most of which appear to me almost out of reach on the hazy edge of my comprehension horizon. So you'll have to bear with me for a bit in my philosophical spitballing. First, we human beings form a significant part of the environment in which we are trying to survive. This means survival of the fittest is a self-referencing system, which in turn means that morality is not properly grounded. Morality, therefore, can wander chaotically off in all sorts of different and unexpected directions, with nothing special or unique about our current location. Second, could it not also be that certain immoral behaviour plays a part in human flourishing? After all, how else has immoral behaviour survived, if not by playing some fitness role? We have survived quite well, not only with various changing views of morality, but by doing things that either then or now were considered immoral. If you think about it, a sinner is as much a product of evolution as a saint. What therefore is the interrelationship between these two classes of behaviour such that both moral and immoral actions contribute together in our species to the successful propagation of our genetic information? It seems to make conceptual sense at least that an optimal survival strategy might be cooperating with some organisms while competing with others, being nice to some and nasty to others, or being nice some of the time and nasty at other times. How then can we consider certain behaviour moral just because it leads to human flourishing, when immoral behaviour also plays a beneficial role in human flourishing? Now, it makes my head hurt, but if we go down this route, we need to think about a second order morality in which what we normally consider morality is actually part of a larger moral framework where what we believe to be bad actions can actually be good ones in this meta-morality. In this framework, it's not simply what we consider moral that helps us survive, rather having the actual belief in objective morality also plays a foundational part. Which takes me to my third concern about grounding morality in evolution. I'll introduce it with a question. Is my belief in objective morality entirely the product of evolution? That is, did people believe morals were objectively grounded outside of their opinions, not because it was actually true, although they thought that it was, but because believing it helped them to survive? If that was the case, what are we to do now that we have been enlightened as to the biological mechanisms behind our morals? Do we do the moral thing and keep believing that morality is objective even though we know it is not? Or do we do the immoral thing and stop believing in objective morality because it's just an illusion designed to increase our survival chances? In which case, won't we be less likely to survive? Basically, if evolution resulted in humans believing in objective morality and so surviving better, what do we do now that the bubble has been burst? Do we dismantle morality altogether? Now, in practice, many people simply rummage through the wreckage of rules like a box of mixed different coloured buttons for those they like the look of, hoping or feeling that they will make life better in some way, but at the same time accepting that there is nothing particularly binding about the rules they take a fancy to. But maybe there is an even bigger problem for the idea that morals are grounded in evolution. My fourth concern is that if evolution explains our belief in objective morality and our desire for happiness, can any belief resist evolution's erosive power? Are any of our convictions about the world likely to be true rather than merely beneficial for survival? What stops belief in evolution from being a self-defeating worldview that erases itself? Finally, there is a fifth observation on the idea that evolution is the best basis for objective morality. If happiness is a measure of morality, and morality is a measure of a successful strategy to propagate genetic information, why stop there? What is so foundational about genetic propagation? Evolution is quite a high-level description. Scientifically speaking, life is just something that happens on the way to increased entropy. So does that mean that morality is ultimately a measure of maximising the rate of entropy increase? But who really cares about that? It seems to me that something important has got missed out in the rush of reductionism. So the idea is that evolution shapes our beliefs and behaviours for survival advantage. Simplistically, we might think that our ideas of what is moral tracks what behaviour is going to help us reproduce. But I suspect it's more complex. There may be survival benefit for some in what is considered immoral actions. I see no reason to assume that only moral behaviour is beneficial. And is it moral to believe in objective morality? Evolution may shape the beaks of birds, but I don't think it sufficiently grounds my morality, at least not in a way that corresponds to my strongest intuitions about it. But if feelings, philosophy and biology do not provide firm enough foundations, what would be a better basis for a maximally objective morality? I think a good candidate would be a unique, eternal and perfectly good being who alone created and sustains everything, and who works all things for his own good purposes. Furthermore, since this being is itself the greatest good anyone can obtain, enjoy or know, living in harmony with its nature and purposes, i.e. acting morally, results in obtaining the greatest good, joy, happiness and well-being. Similarly, living at odds with it, that is acting immorally, is sure to result in loss because you are turning away from that which is the greatest good. You are living, as it were, against the grain of reality. Further, this loss would be both catastrophic and irrevocable, because perfect goodness by definition must be forever at odds with anything that is the tiniest bit bad. Now, even if you don't think that such a being exists, perhaps you can see that it would at least be a good candidate for maximising the objectivity of morality. Morality would be grounded in a unique being who is perfectly good and who created and sustains the universe in line with its own innate and unchanging goodness. Its innate goodness grounds reality, and so living at odds with it inevitably results in disharmony. Now, there are some challenges to this view as well, of course, such as why is there evil in the world at all? And more pragmatically, is there a way in which my discordant actions can be redeemed? I look for answers to these questions in the person and work of Jesus, who reveals a God who is not just good, but gracious, and whose response to wrongdoing is not just justice, but unmerited mercy. I know that burning widows alive on their husband's funeral pyre is objectively wrong. Clearly, though, that was not self-evident to everyone, as thousands of people over hundreds of years thought it was the good and right thing to do. Maybe it even made a lot of people happy and they flourished, I don't know. But my certainty that some things are so utterly and deeply wrong means I cannot and will not reduce my sense of objective morality to mere personal or cultural preference, or a means to maximise happiness, mine or anybody else's, or a strategy for propagating DNA or increasing entropy. So looking around for a firmer foundation, I understand morality to be grounded in the nature of a perfectly good being who created everything, including you and me, and has made a way for us to return to him and join him in his joy.